Another CEO, founder Wisdom Pod with Mukul Pal with us from Toronto, founder and CEO at Alpha Block. Mukul, welcome to the pod. Brief introduction about yourself, and then let's pick right up where we were at our pre-pod convo, because I think this is interesting.
Yeah, so a brief intro about me is that I'm a career quant. I've been building quantitative models for about 25 years, and I've done I've I'm a learner. I've done various masters, one in finance, one in statistics. I've written 45 academic papers. I got MIT to give me a fintech award, and um, and that's about me, and that's what I do. I run an
Oops.
a,
Yeah, I was muted. Sorry. What were you saying? You run what?
I run Alpha Block. Alpha Block is a company that builds index funds as an application, but it's a deep tech company which is building artificial general intelligence.
Right. Okay, let's pick up right at the core of our last convo. So I agree with your principle that AGI can be creative if we infuse an evolutionary algorithm inside of it, but then begs the question, how do we do that? Because often when I think about mother nature, that's how I call it, and it's still this very abstract algorithm. We haven't quantified this algorithm of evolution. We don't really know where it comes from, um, how it operates precisely. Like if we talk on a atomic level or on a cellular level, it's these cells, right? They're eating one another, they're reproducing, but where does that come from? Is it DNA programming? How would you actually cross pollinate that to AGI?
Yeah, that's a uh, great segue into where we left. See, nature is um is super you know super like it's super intelligent, right? So how does a super intelligent entity, how would it operate? First of all, it would operate in a way that it'll build systems to operate. It'll not really operate itself, it'll build smart mechanisms, right? If we are building an intelligent society or intelligent solutions, we are not going to do and build that intelligence piece by piece. We'll build mechanisms, agents that will create intelligence, right? So think about nature. What will it do? It'll build mechanisms, or it'll do the similar thing. It'll not do a piece by piece thing. So that's the one thing which means that nature is already operates as mechanisms which work on their own. That's why they call it perpetual motion machine, and that's why they don't give it a patent in the US patent office. If you go and say, you know what, I have got a mechanism which works like a nature's perpetual machine, they will tell you to get lost, because the whole idea of patenting nature is absurd, right? So I'm coming from this super intelligence thing to mechanisms, and the key thing about these mechanisms is that they have this beautiful thing called randomness. They have this beautiful thing called errors. They have this beautiful thing called chaos. So somewhere these are the triggers for nature to make those mechanisms work. So nature is not doing piece by piece. It is actually moving from evolutionary algorithms to many other things are which will never understand, right? Maybe this is a long-winded answer for what you asked me, but I hope I answered a part of your question.
Some part of it. So who coded that in the first place? Because if we look at laws of physics, I mean, is it like the laws of entropy? We always need to move forward. We always accelerate. We always become hotter. Where does that come from?
Oh, that's again a brilliant jump, because I believe nature jumps. It is not always continuous. It sometimes jumps. So this physics is a really a good way to enter this window of nature or understanding how it works, and you know that the nature breaks the second law. The nature exploits the second law. And second law does not know how nature abuses it or how nature exploits it, and that's the Maxwell demon, right? That the how does the demon come and change the laws of entropy? How suddenly this entropy that is increasing has a low entropy cluster in it and life happens, right? The whole idea of Boltzmann brain. So that says the crux of what I believe to get an insight into nature's functioning, and that is how does nature manipulate the second law?
Yeah,
How
well,
does
I
it
mean,
use
nature is kind of the parent of the physics seems to be the parent of nature, or maybe both are even the same thing. Maybe both are not separate. Maybe life is physics in itself. And my simpleton brain can only point to the simulation theory when I think about these things, and there's probably a stronger, smarter life form out there. Doesn't really matter the 4 billion year thing. What is time? Like it's probably not even a concept in these worlds. Um, but it seems that something kind of programmed us to go that way. And it seemed that in this game of everything, if we do infuse that in AI, yes, it will be creative. Do you think that's possible? Like from that standpoint, right? Because if I look at it with other lens, AGI also seems like a major leap, and we're still unsure why, because we haven't got any scientific history to prove it. But I mean, before there was the light, before there was Wi-Fi, there wasn't. So I think we're capable of everything regarding this. But if we do infuse evolutionary laws and mechanism and code into that AGI thing, the question is like where will it go? I do think that short term it could lead to somewhat disastrous consequences. A partial annihilation of humanity, at least, just like we did with a bunch of animal species. What do you think about that?
Yeah, means that evolutionary theories are also many, and there are conflicts um, talked about in very um, much vocal context by J.C. Willis, who wrote about the land and species, and Willis, who's kind of the forefather of the rich get richer principle in nature, and he talked about how the Darwinian evolutionary approach had flaws, right? So there's always this question about that that window we are looking into, does it really explain us uh, enough facets of nature? And what I believe is that we'll never see nature in its complete form. We'll always have these facets. We'll never have this complete view. So we're always this child learning. Humanity is always on a learning path. So AGI will never get to a stage where it'll understand completely. All it will have is a pieces of the blind elephant, right? Means we'll see the rope, we'll see the thing, but focusing on this direction will take us from the stone age we are in today. The stone age we believe is so intelligent, but it is not. It's we are just creating new information. So and somewhere this theory of everything is a hedonistic treadmill. We are always on it. We're trying to find it, and we'll never find it, right? And so I think that somewhere I think Planck talked about it, that science progresses with funerals, and I think more people have to die, more thinkers have to die for new thinkers to emerge, and I think that's a journey we have for eternity.
I'd agree with that. It's just like space constantly accelerating and expanding is just like Bitcoin, and why Bitcoin is there to stay. It's this infinite mechanism to some degree, right? And I do think that every product out there that's coded with evolutionary laws will win. So I think that it's in our interest as founders and CEOs to always think in first principles and think on physics principle to build companies and products. Do you think so?
Uh, yes, means you know, I've written about it in a write up called Web 3, where I says that how dismissing Bitcoin or this Web 3 revolution is somewhere naive, because markets, if you are designing them with a natural thinking in mind, then that is real market. And Bitcoin, designed as a decentralized, is a real market mechanism, you know. And the whole idea about the value of Bitcoin, I think at some level the masses create value. You put masses into give them some creative thing to do, and they will create value, right? So I don't necessarily feel about the value and the economic and the causal explanation. I see it from the other side. Create something popular, something which can capture imagination, and you will create a story like Star Wars, and suddenly you see innovations happening in real life which are inspired by Star Wars, right? Or inspired by Star Trek. So I think it's an inverse theory in terms of imagination leading to creativity, leading to economic purpose. It doesn't start from economic purpose to imagination and creativity. So it's kind of both ways. But this dismissal or seeing a small thing and finding flaws in it, it's a very human thing to do. And there's nothing wrong in it. It's just the way human civilization or human thinking works.
Yeah, I do think as founders, I'm quite focused on communities nowadays, and think your role is kind of to view yourself as a scientist, not only to deploy experiments, but to create possible environments so that life can happen. That's how people would need to view their products, create certain conditions for your community to flourish by itself. And I will keep the audience updated about my experiments. But is it starting a Slack channel? Is it interacting with them? Is it like playing fun games and making challenge? I think we need to design the infrastructure that could possibly create conditions for life. That's a business slash mental model I'm getting right now. Looking at your LinkedIn now, how is it to run like derivatives in New Delhi, in Mumbai, in uh, yeah, in Bangalore most probably, but let's say in India in the 90s, like was it like a gold rush type, Wall Street type? Describe us the precise environment you were operating in back in these days and what you learned from it.
Yeah, I mean, there are always new trends happening, and there's always gold rushes happening. I mean, I do not know of a time when there is not a gold rush happening. Means it's not happening every day, but it's happening every 5 years, every 10 years. There's a gold rush, right? So I've seen multiple gold rushes, but as you start witnessing those things, you realize that it's going to happen again. So yes, that was my first feeling of gold rush when I was there, because the company that I was working for, in the basement of one of the founders in laws, became a 50 billion plus market cap company. So it was the gold rush, and it was, but again, the new gold rush comes and destroys the first gold rush, right? It's always a rule, relay, and you have to not only find a um, intuition of getting in, but you also have to find an intuition of getting out. If you do not go out, then you kind of have to wait to innovate to the second gold rush, and so on and so forth. So it was amazing learning. And markets were maturing, and there was a lot of challenge of somebody who was innovating at a certain level, to see how the market will evolve. And I think that more structures were coming, more quantitative work was coming, but I believe I was one of the first quant guys or the first generation of quant guys in India, because it was moving from information to systems. So it was pretty exciting. It means I was quite thrilled to move from a basement of a New Delhi um, electronic broker to the Bombay Stock Exchange on the 24th floor in the most premium real estate in India, or maybe probably in also in the world. And that was a very like heady days for me, like going from the low extremity to see the, so I was feeling nature at play. It was crazy for me, because also because financial markets, you cannot learn financial market as a young person in a in a in when you're not in the financial capital of the world or the financial capital of the country. So Bombay was the financial capital of the country, and I could not learn finance from New Delhi. So something was pulling me to Bombay, you know.
Right. The lessons I get from there, because I'm trying to build a startup ecosystem as of now, and that implies that in theory, the startups that I start will help one another, right? It will be win-win. There's some of these mechanisms in nature. For example, a vine in a tree, an ant in a tree. Sometimes there's a parasitic relationship, and I think that's where I need to cut things off. If we take Meta, for example, um, and all of their branches, well, they had choices to make. They had opportunity costs, and I think a clean lesson here, because I'm not too much for selling some of my branches and selling some of the components to this ecosystem that I'm creating. But when I realize that one business is taking away from the other and there's creative destruction at play, then I do think it's in my best interest to shut one down and double down on the other one. And I think that businesses in that same branch of thinking, they need to adapt to the times. They need to innovate, and they need to be comfortable destroying shit. Um, a lot of time they just like are too conservative. That could be the case in Apple's case. I mean, recently, after a decade of working on the Apple Vision Pro, they got it out finally. But it's that thing, where you become too bureaucratic and you're not taking risks anymore. Google also somewhat felt that with the lack of a chat GPT and Bard. And I do think that in these instances, creative destruction needs to happen. So yes, investors are frisky. Yes, they want to manage risk. They don't want to put too much eggs in the innovation basket, but sometimes you need to take big risks and create that brand new shiny product that might even destroy your old flagship product. For example, a chatbot in the case of Google search, the search business will be destroyed by that. They will have creative ways to do so. But yeah, that's the lesson I'm getting from there. What do you think about that?
Yeah, means that was Web 2.0, where every one of us knew how to build an ecosystem, because we had the tools to build ecosystems, right? The whole manufacturing of communities was Web 2.0, right? And that was the, so I agree with you on that. And what I also want to say is that the whole idea of the science of community formation, or finding an ecosystem and throw experiments on those products, that was a beautiful way you said it. And I think that the how to understand the science is what brings us back to the science I was talking about complex systems, right? How, and this is the science that the world doesn't have. So I think that the theory of everything, or the or many theories of everything, are somewhere uh, rooted in that science of understanding what is the right size for a system to thrive, and what is a size beyond which the system decays. It brings to the maths of that, when is the rich get richer going to start decaying, and when is that poor getting poorer going to become the next rich entity.
Right. Fully understood on that one. Tell us about like the quant aspect of it. Like, how were you attracted to the quant movement? And to me, like quant, well, yeah, it's nowadays my interest is more like in AGI trading for me. What's the difference between both? And am I right in thinking that like, yeah, AGI could be a better trader than, well, I mean, they're both different things. Like, just refresh your brain and tell us about the quants, how you got into it, and how do these guys had advantages and edge over classic traders.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, there is so much information out there, and if you don't find an edge, and if you don't find a place um where no one is digging, you you do not have a real rich get richer advantage, right? Means the world is digging in a certain place, they are digging oil, and it's a, insight or intelligence or extraction of intelligence is a new age industry, because we got technology, we got computers, we got data. Where do you want to start digging, right? So for me, the 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 personality that I had, or the education that I had, or the conceptual thinking that I had, made it kind of obvious for me that I have to find a new place to dig. So that's how I got into quantitative work, because I felt that there was I was uh, into a virgin territory, and I had to uh, dig on my own. And when you are on your own, it has a huge more like pull attraction. You're so it's like your canvas. So that's how I got into quantitative work. And regarding trading, and about AGI being best traders, you know, I see it as a war of low frequency versus high frequency, because the further you go, the less the data you have, the harder to predict it is. And the higher you go in frequency, the most competition you have, the most noise you have, but the most instant gratification you have. So I believe that the virgin territory now with is between the war of the low frequency bot versus the high frequency bot. So there is so much competition in a high frequency territory, and there's almost zero competition in the low frequency, right? So really don't think about it as a trader per se. I always think about I always think about temporal. Where do you want to dig, in the longer term or in the shorter term? And human beings are going to find it very hard to dig in the shorter term, because it's an overcrowded place, and it is a manipulated place. The war is already between machines in the shorter term, that to build a better machine, your incremental alpha is so less. But while you go into the virgin territory, you have $1 trillion arbitrage.
Interesting. Um, can you give us like a final on a final note, like what's your take on AGI in the next couple of years? What you think will happen? What are your predictions?
Yeah, so the we are approaching it from as from a um from this virgin approach. So for us, AGI has is needs redefinition. AGI is not about human intelligence only, it's about nature's intelligence. So this is where we started about the moonshot. So that's what we believe. If that is the moonshot, means all we have to do is keep nibbling at that opportunity, because it's a gold mine for eternity, because you can never understand it. And I think that the fact that we are starting it, I believe that's a real gold rush we are starting. And we are creating this ecosystem, as you said. where we have created our sandboxes, we have created our GitHub codes. We want community to start digging with us because it's such a large opportunity. So that's where we are. We are already, disrupting the low frequency, passive, Vanguard, BlackRock index fund space. And our larger opportunity we see is how these capabilities can go across domains, in sentiment, in weather, in energy, climate. So many opportunities out there to do longer term forecasting or longer term data insights.
Love it. Where can people find out more about you, Mukul?
Alphablog.org is us, and my LinkedIn is there with 750 million already people on LinkedIn, almost a billion. So I guess it's so easy to find me, right? Means you're helping us get our story across. So thank you for that, Charles.
My pleasure. Thank you so